In our previous section, we have seen how can we render conditionally and also display the list of contacts at the same time. So we were able to achieve this requirement by combining two concepts that we have learned earlier. In this section, what we'll do is I have a requirement where I do not want to render a specific section in the LWC component, but I want to change the view that comes up, or I want to change the look and feel of that LWC component depending on the user interaction. So let's say if this is the first look and feel of the LWC component, I want the ability to change it to the second LWC component. So if you see here, let's say if this is a card and this is how the first time it looks like, upon user clicking on a button, I want to change it to this second LWC. I want to change the details on the card. So now what is happening, the entire LWC component that I've built would be changed as a part of this process. So I want the ability to change the entire look and feel for that LWC component depending on the user interaction. So how do I do it? Instead of rendering a section conditionally on the LWC component, I want to change the entire look and feel of it. How do I go ahead and do this one? So for time being, what we'll do is, since I have two different UIs that I want to generate, what I'll do, I'll go ahead and build them here. Right? So what I would do, I'll go ahead and build them here. I'll comment out the code that I was using earlier, so that way we have a fresh set of sections that I can reuse. Right? I've commented out all the code that I have. I'm making use of this lightning card just to show you the difference. If I deploy this component, what would be shown to the end user? This lightning card would be displayed to the end user with this footer. Now what I want a similar HTML, but that should be decided by the end user. I want to render the entire HTML itself. For that, what I can do, I can go ahead and create one more file here. The intention is I'll have a new set of HTML that I'll be using for this display. So I'll say second demo LWC component dot HTML. What I did, I've created another HTML page. Now what I will have inside this one, just to have the symmetry and understand what is being changed, I'll just copy paste. I'll just go ahead and copy paste the card and close this template tag, so that way I do not get the basic errors. Now I have the first demo LWC component.html, another HTML page which basically says second demo LWC.html. Now the idea here is, if the user clicks on a button, it should redirect to the second page. On this page, if the user clicks on that button, it should direct to the first page. So that is the intention here. For that, since there is some input that I need to take it from the end user, what I'll do, I'll place a button here. In case if you do not know the syntax of your button, feel free to go to the component library and get that syntax from there. Simply go to the component library here, and under the component reference tab, search for button. That is where you will get that syntax that you would need. All right, so I'm just taking the syntax. Since I already have it in my VS Code, I'm making use of it. Feel free to take the code that you already have in the VS Code, or feel free to copy it from the component library. I'm just going ahead with the button that I have here, pasting it at the end. In case if you want, for clarity, you can remove this code also. It has just been commented. That means system would ignore all this code that I have. Just to avoid any confusion, what I'll do, I'll just remove this code that I have here and save this one. Now what I have here, I have a button which says display message as a label, which I don't think so would be helping the user to understand what they can do with this button. Instead, what I'll say, change template, or simply I'll say click here change the template. So this is what the message that I would be showing as a label to my button on the UI. Now what has been invoked? Do I need it as an slot? The answer is no. Do I need this class? I can still remove it. This class doesn't make any difference in terms of the functionality. Now, what would happen? If user clicks on this button, it would go to this function and do some processing, right? So this is what this button would do. It is displaying a message. Do I need that functionality at this point of time? The answer is no. I want this button to switch the LWC component that is rendered to this particular HTML page. I want to change in the look and feel of that LWC component. So for that reason, I do not want to go with this handle click as a function. Instead, I'll write a new function here. I'll say handle switch template. Switch template. Right, so that is what we are doing here. So I'm just making sure that my function is resembling what exactly I'm doing as an action. So I've created a new function here. In my JS file, I've created a new function here. What is the logic that I need to write in here? Before I go ahead and write down the logic here, let's also decorate our second HTML page so that way we understand that we are looking at a second HTML instead of the first one. So I'll just say my second footer here, and also change the title a little so that way it calls out that we are now looking at a second LWC. Now, once I have that, I have two HTML pages that I want to control with this JS file. How do I do that? First, in our JS file, we need to tell the LWC component that yes, I am using two templates here, two HTML templates here. So for that, I need to import them. How do I import them? Import, write import, and then write from, and give the path for it. How do I write the path? Simply write dot backslash and your template name. So it would be looking into this folder for your templates. So what is my template? First template name, first demo LWC comp.html. So if you see here, this is my template name. It would look for this path and it is expecting me to give a name so that I can use it inside this JS file. So I'll name this as first template. Right? I've given a name as first template here. Now, similarly, I have also a second template that I'm about to use. I want to conditionally render that. So I'll just copy paste this and make some changes to reflect for the second component that I have. I'm just changing the path in which my second template is present. So this is my second template. The name of it is second demo LWC comp.html, which is this one. Since I have imported them, I can make use of these templates within my code. Now, how do I tell this LWC component to render them depending on what is this user doing on the UI at this point of time? I have a button that tells me to switch the template. But initially, how do I tell the system to render, to take this file as a reference as the first one? For that, what I'll do, I'll go ahead and declare one variable. I'll name it as showTemp1 and I'll set that to true. Now what I'll do here, I'll remove other code that we have in our LWC component that we are using earlier. You can also comment them out. For time being, for simplicity, I've just removed it. Now what I'll do here, in order for me to toggle between these two templates based on the button click that the user is doing, I'll go ahead and create one property that would help me decide which template to be shown. So I'll name it as showTemp1 is equals true. I'll name my variable as showTemp1 is equals true. Now in my button, I can tell the system that if this button has already been clicked, show the second template. Now I've created a property called showTemp1, which is set to true by default. Now, In a second from now, you will understand why am I creating this Boolean variable or Boolean property here. The idea here is we need to have a identifier, or we need to have a logic that decides which template needs to be shown on the LWC. For that, what I'm doing, I'm using a method that is given by Salesforce, and this method decides which template would be shown to the end user or to the user who is looking at that LWC. Now I'm writing a return statement to tell this LWC component which template needs to be displayed. I have an option to display the first template or the second template. I'm just referring with these names because I have imported them here. If you have written a conditional statement like if, it is like this. If this condition is true, then display the first template. If that is not the case, else display the second condition. In Apex also, we have this conditional operator which goes with the question mark. And we have an option to write the positive scenario here and the negative scenario here. So I'm using that syntax here to return the template to this LWC component so that it can render that in the UI. I'll write this dot show template if this value is set to true. Which condition would be executed? The first condition would be executed. What is that I wanted to show here? If this value is set to true, I want to display the first template. So I want to display the first template. If that is not the case, if this value is not set to true, if this value is not set to true, then display the second one. All right. If you see here, we have told the system what to render depending on this value. Now, where is my logic that changes this value? If you see here, every time it is set to true. That means this condition is set to true. This condition is set to true every time the first template would be rendered. Now, that is not our intention. Our intention is to toggle between these two templates that I have. That means there should be some logic that decides, or there should be some logic that changes this functionality. Now, where do I write that logic? If you remember, we have added a button so that I can take an input from the user saying that, yes, I want to change to the second template. I'll be making use of that logic here, where I'll say, if somebody clicks on this button that is there on the UI, that is where I'll go ahead and flip the value that is there inside this one. So how do I do that? Simply write this dot show template 1 is equals whatever that is there inside it. I'm just changing the value. So if it is false, I'm making it as true. If it is true, I'm making it as false. I'm using the not condition here to do that. Now what is happening here? If somebody clicks on this button, if the value is true, that becomes false. This becomes false, and we are assigning that value here. In short, it is like this. I have a property that is initially set to true. If somebody clicks on the button on this first template, since that is what has been rendered first, if somebody clicks on this button, this function would be called. So it goes here. And what is the value here? This value is referring here, which is set to true. By default, it is set to true. Not of true becomes false. So this entire logic becomes false. And where we are assigning this false value, the same value from where we have fetched it. So this becomes false. Now, again, the user has clicked on that button. Now what would happen? The reverse of what we have discussed would happen. Since the value is set to false here, we are fetching that value here, putting a not to it, which becomes true, and we are assigning to the same variable, same property. Now, instead of having a false here, this value becomes true. This becomes true. Now, what would happen since this attribute has been changed, this condition has also been evaluated. If it is true, we are displaying the first one. If it is set to false, it is displaying the second one. Initially, when we started off, we are setting this value to true. What would happen? If this value is true, then this template would be set. On this template, we have a button. Upon clicking on that, this function gets executed and the value gets changed. Since it is set to false, this time the second template has been displayed. So that is what is happening here. Now, what is present here? We have only a button on my first template, which would help me switch the template to the second one. But do I have the same thing in my second code? The answer is no. Right, so let's fix that. So let's copy the same thing and paste it here. Now, do I need to change the function that I'm calling? The answer is no, because this function itself is handling both the request wherever it is coming from, because it is in the same component itself. So I've made the changes. Let's deploy this code and see that in action. Our component got deployed. Let's switch to our Salesforce org. Do a hard refresh. This time we are expecting a card which says first LWC component, and there should be a button which says click here to change the template. Remember these changes. I'm currently seeing my footer and first LWC component here. I'll click on this button, and as soon as I do that, the component is getting changed. And interestingly, there is one more thing that is missing, which says my second footer is coming at the bottom. So ideally, we have achieved that functionality. Let's fix what is breaking here. Let's understand why is that second footer coming at the bottom. The reason for that is I have moved this section outside of my card. So that is the reason why it is coming up like that. So let's fix it. Save these changes. All right, so let's make these changes. So that way it would show up as it is, however it is looking at the first section. So my changes are done. Let's go back to our Salesforce, do a hard refresh. If you see here, we have this button. Upon clicking on it, it is changing to the second component. If I click on this one, it is taking me to the first one. So this entire LWC component is rendered based on the action that I'm doing here. Now you would ideally use that when you want to change the look and feel of that entire component. That is where you would use this two template approach, where you would decide which template needs to be displayed depending on the user action. Right. In case if you want to render a section, you can go out with the previous section that we have talked about, render that template conditionally using your if true template tag. So that brings us to the end of the section where we have understood how to toggle between the look and feel of the HTML page, and we were able to successfully render a different template to the end user depending on the user interaction on the screen.
Hey guys, if you like this video, do like, share and subscribe to SFDC Quest.